Unintentional community. They live together in a house.
Welcome back to the Unintentional Community Podcast. This week, episode 2, we are talking about a theme near and dear to all of our hearts. But if you're just joining us for the first time, go back to episode 1. You're going to want to understand who we are, how we're living together, and episode 1 is on the pros and cons of living in community. And once you've caught up on that, jump in here to episode 2. Now, let's get into the show. And welcome back to the second episode of Unintentional Community, the show where 5 millennials and a baby try to figure out how to live together. Mayor?
And where Kevin puts me on the spot and makes me uncomfortable.
That's good.
With his intense games.
Ben?
The show where we try and see how many pairs of shoes we can fit in the front foyer.
The show where we try to solve the mystery of the missing drinking glasses.
The show where we screw up a lot and love each other anyways.
Too earnest.
So nice.
All right, this episode is all about
I just had another good
expectations.
thing for the game, too. Damn.
You had a good name?
Say it,
do
say
it,
it,
do
say
it.
I was going to say, the
Unintentional
show
Community, the show
where we figure out how we're responsible for all the salt and vinegar chip consumption in Canada.
So true.
So true. Also very meaningful. Oh yeah, this episode is all
Tons
about...
of potatoes go into our tummies every year.
Where are the potatoes?
It's us.
This is episode is all about expectations. Because this is, if you listen to the first episode, we danced around this topic 50 times because this is the only way that any of us have managed to survive living in a home
so
together.
true.
Make or break, folks.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just set up the basic idea of expectation talk that we kind of use, and I will give shout outs in advance to 2 people. First off, to the studio that we are currently recording in, Sheepdog Studio in Hamilton, Ontario, which have graciously given us this space to record the podcast. If you are a musician, you want to record your own podcast, it's very cozy in here.
We're sitting in this beautiful log cabin
It's
in the middle
great.
of Hamilton.
There's gin and tonic, which I assume they provide, and you should just...
We bought that.
We bought it. But you could bring it yourself. And you just should definitely do some work here. Thank you so much to the team. First shout out. Second shout out. All this expectation stuff is rooted in a book called What Did You Expect by Brian Reynolds, the father of our good friend Brooks Reynolds, and a great person in and of his own right.
And a great babysitter.
And Brooks is a great babysitter. I don't know if
I
Brian's
assume
a good
Brian,
babysitter.
if he has multiple children, so
He has kept
probably
children
okay
and
at-
grandchildren alive.
Yeah.
Brian wrote a book called What Did You Expect? And our leadership team at the church I work at read it a couple of years ago, and then I was like, oh no, this is way more than just like a team thing. This is marriage, household, everything. So here's his basic rules. I'm going to butcher them. Go pay for the book and read it. I'll lay out the basic rules, and then we will dive into some examples ourselves. Steph, you were mouthing something at me. What up?
Should we say our names in case like someone's like, oh, you should listen to just this
Welcome
one
back
episode?
to the podcast.
If you're just listening to this one episode, go back and listen to episode 1, you ding dong. But sure, I don't mean to call you ding dong. I'm Kevin.
I'm Steph.
I'm Meg.
I'm Ben.
I'm Meredith.
There you go. Clementine is also part of this family, but she's in bed. It's late, and she can barely talk. So, basic rundown of expectations. 2 questions that we are told in this book to ask again and again. 1, are your expectations of someone else realistic or unrealistic? And 2, are your expectations communicated or uncommunicated?
Yeah,
It's
those are good
honestly
questions.
the question.
Will change your life.
So, with that in mind, this is a thing that we run through every time you come home and the dishes aren't done and you're angry, every time there's too many shoes in the front hallway, every time the salt and vinegar chips were eaten by your housemate named Kevin. You ask yourself, have I told Kevin? Because you do that thing where you're like, they should just know.
Yeah.
And in a perfect world, everybody just knows. But if you married or have friends or family members, you know that people don't just know. And so the idea behind this expectation stuff is you cannot be upset with somebody unless you have communicated an expectation and it is a realistic expectation. So with that in mind, I thought we could start by just saying you're all like dang around the table. So I'm assuming that this is something that resonates with you. But does this resonate with you? Before we get into a bunch of specifics, we are going to talk this episode about like meal planning and being social, chores, house rules, who owns the house, just a million practical things. Before we get into all that, does this resonate with you guys? And do you have any stories of a time where expectations saved your life in our household?
I'm trying to think of if there's any like glaring examples of when someone did not follow through on an expectation. I think the first time I got really frustrated was when I went to have a drink of water and literally all the drinking glasses were gone. I'm so sorry, Ben.
You
but
guys
this
can't
is
see this, but
directly-
they're all looking at me right now.
Yeah. So Ben has a thing where he'll
become
like
a
take a
running
glass
joke.
of water, he'll go up, he'll be doing something in his room, and he'll just forget it and leave it in his room.
Yeah.
And so the first time when I texted the house, I'm like, where the hell are all the drinking glasses? And then Ben comes in the kitchen and grabs a tray, first of all.
That's your first sign that things aren't right.
What? And then, the fact that he brought them all down. And I remember the first time I was mad, I was like, how could you deprive the whole house of drinking water because you stole all the glasses? And for what it's worth, Ben still steals all the glasses.
Yep,
but
still
now
do.
it's at least like we check in more than once a month. Now, like once a week, we're like, okay, glass check. Ben's like, coming down now.
It's like every Monday.
Yes.
It's like pretty like clockwork. By the end of Monday, it's like the cupboard's full again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Ben's
Because
day
Monday's
off.
my cleaning day. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, and in that, it's a little unrealistic to expect that your housemates will never take cups into their rooms.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not necessarily realistic. But it is realistic that at least there are some cups in the kitchen, and
Yeah.
that at least once
You
a
don't have
week,
all of them all the time.
you
Yeah.
make sure you bring them all
Yeah.
down and have
Yeah.
them done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that whole thing resonates with me a lot. One thing I've tried to erase from my vocabulary since we've started living with people is the phrase, if it was me, I would do this. And that's such a way that I'm prone to think. And I've realized that it's just so unhelpful because it's not me. You guys aren't me. I'm not you. And we all do things differently. And we all think about things differently. And also there's things going on in your lives that I'm not aware of. And so one thing Steph and I talk about a lot is giving each other the benefit of the doubt. So like, I think there's something different between like something that happens in the house and it annoys you or bothers you, and then something that you realize is a habit of somebody's. And so I think that's where expectations become really important, because if it just happens once and you're like, dang, I really don't like that they did that. I find that giving each other the benefit of the doubt is really great, because it's like, they might have left their dishes because like they're late for a meeting, or maybe they had a rough morning, or maybe Clem was like being really hard this morning and I had to run out of the house, or maybe they're like feeling really sad today and they just couldn't, you know? But then it's like, if they do that 10 days in a row, then it's like, all right, now it's on me. Your dirty dishes are actually on me now, because I haven't told you that they're bothering me.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here resenting you, and we haven't talked about it. And so it's like, it's interesting to watch that shift of like, your thing that's annoying that you're doing is actually like, now it's my problem because I haven't said anything.
But doesn't that just kill relationships? Like that feeling of like, well, you should know.
Yeah.
Like and not just housemates, but like all relationships is that like bitterness and resentment of like, well, if it was me, I would do all the dishes right after I ate.
And maybe you would. Like, maybe that's 100%
Totally.
true. It's
But
just
if you
it's
haven't
not you.
communicated that clearly and like kind of named that concretely,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can expect somebody else to be you.
Yeah, and I think when you say that, you're kind of saying like, if it was me, and in your head you're like, me, a perfect person, you know? Because you're kind of thinking like, my best version of myself would do this, but like that doesn't leave a lot of room for like a graciousness with yourself or with other people, because we all screw up.
Yes. And there will be seasons and weeks where you're really busy. I think like living with other people exposes your blind spots. And I can think of weeks where like, if I've had like a really full school week and I've been working like full-time hours on top of that, and like I'm just spent, and then I come home and there's dishes in the sink, I'm like irrationally mad. I'm like, how could they know I've had a rough week? This is a personal affront to me that there's dirty dishes.
Yeah,
and
we're
it's
like leaving notes on the dishes like, hey Meredith, we don't like you.
like, how
We
could
don't
they
care
like,
about your
I've
house.
had such a rough week and they just did this to me. And it's like you will sometimes lose perspective on things, and so it's important to be checking in again, communicating with your household to say where you're at, because otherwise it's easy to get very into your own head, very into your own life, and even though you're living with all these people, forgetting that other people have their things going on.
It's funny that we mentioned dishes so much. I feel like dishes is like where housing relationships live and die.
Yeah.
Like the kitchen sink is where it happens.
And the only
battlefront.
space in the house that's too small always is the kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
Like every house. It doesn't matter if you live in a mansion. The kitchen is too small because you all work the same paths. And
Yeah.
you're just like, I collide only into you guys in the kitchen.
yeah.
That's right.
Oh yeah, we've definitely found, like, in terms of expectations, I think this is a funny thing that we haven't talked about a lot, is like we've all found our own little tiny bits of time where we prep and make our food so that we don't run into each other really.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I see her going in there with her grocery bags. Okay, I'll wait 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, she's just come out. I'm going to go fry my ground beef. Okay, you know what? I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes so that Ben can make his smoothie. It's like,
if Steph and I are in the kitchen at the same time, that is the moment that I'm truly aware of how like tall we are. Like we are not tiny women, and I'm just like, oh, we're just two giants in here trying to not crash into each other.
it's like, sorry. No, I'm sorry.
It's just like, I'm just gonna keep bouncing off of you. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. But like, it's one of those times where I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when
Not
I think like
appetite.
both of Ben and Meredith both started doing earlier mornings, or I think it was roughly around the same time that like Clementine had her own room, so you guys were downstairs a lot more.
Yeah.
And just people were downstairs before like 9 a.m. And I was like, it took me like a month to just stop being angry about it. Because I was like, this is my room.
So how did expectations play in for that? Kind of run it through that filter for us.
Kettle, coffee beans.
I mean, the most obvious thing is the kettle.
It was me who filled it last night, just so you know.
So I'm going to get to it. I was going to call you out without you doing it, but it's good. So for me, I'm a very like routine focused person, especially in the morning. I kind of have like a set schedule that, for better or worse, when it gets thrown off, it takes me a little bit to like figure things out. So my mornings usually are like 2.5 hours, and I have them like scheduled like the night beforehand about everything I'm going to do.
Oh yeah.
And I'm a weird person. I understand that. But one of the things is like I fill up the kettle, and then I go work out, and then when I come back upstairs, I usually measure out my coffee beans into the grinder. That was one particular situation, but in general, I wasn't like, it was just a one-off.
You have it all set up.
I do set it all up,
and I think you've learned to flex on that.
I have. And let me tell the story. Let me tell the story.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not going to call it anyone else. I'm fully calling myself out on this. So I for a long time was super resentful because people started getting up and coming downstairs and thinking, oh great, hot water.
Heated itself.
Just heated itself and not thinking about it, and then filling up the kettle and then leaving, like sitting there drinking coffee at the front bar with all of their stuff and all of the stuff being occupied by their things, and of course the kettle is empty. So then and we had until recently an older kettle that just took a long time to boil. So it was just kind of like, oh, okay, I can't have coffee now, and like kind of like to the point where like, well, my straightener was heating up. It was my coffee making time, and then that throws that off, and it just anyways. It took a while for me to actually like own up to the fact that I was resentful and voice communicate my own frustrations with it. And I will call myself out on it. And the first couple times I did it was more passive aggressive than what it actually should have been. And so I had to shift my own expectations to be like, hey, the kettle might not always be filled when you come downstairs. Sometimes it will be and sometimes it won't. And when it is, you should be excited and happy about that and thankful that someone thought about you. But you shouldn't expect other people to be constantly filling up the kettle for you just because I am a weird superhuman who does that in that one instance. And also I don't do that all the time because I'm not perfect and I fail all the time at stuff like that. So I think that's like, for me, a big thing of like, when you hear expectations, you often think of like other people's expectations. But for me, the big shift in living in community has been adjusting my own expectations and owning up to the places where my expectations have created negative effects on other people.
I think one of the hard things with this like communicated expectations is how you even communicate, because we're busy people. So I did not know until this moment that Steph liked the water in the kettle.
I'm like, how did you not know that?
Like, I didn't know. Now,
we
I'm
had this
sure
talk like a
there's
year
a chance
ago.
that she might have mentioned it to me. I don't think she did, but she might have. I'm also kind of just a person that needs things
I
like...
could see you not knowing about that.
Well, and I'd come downstairs and be like, oh, the kettle's full of water. Cool. Not hot. If it was full of hot water, I know that's somebody's water. I can put two and two together. But if it's just full of water, I'm like, well, look at that. The water gnomes came and filled it up in the middle of the night. How lovely of them. Yeah. And so... you probably had 3 conversations or 2 conversations about that, which is a lot in a house to be like, I talked about it with Ben. I talked about it with Meg. And like, I've done this where I'm like, everyone knows. And Meg's like, no, not Meg is my wife, for the record. 2 of us were married. she'd be like, no, they don't all know. You just told Steph and Ben. You haven't talked to Mare about that. And so even figuring out how do you communicate is really tricky. And we have a group chat, which I think is kind of one of those practical tips that I'd give anybody living in community is figure out what communication strategy works for you. Maybe it's like, group chat. Honestly. Maybe it's a Facebook thread. Maybe it's house meetings. We tried that, but we're just too busy.
Really different schedules.
Yeah. And I think like even within those things, like we might all agree that a group chat is great, but then remembering that some of us text differently than other people.
Some people text all day.
Some people find texting really stressful and anxiety inducing. Some people do it for fun.
Even with that, we have learned over time to be like, hey guys, I've got X event. I need to know tonight if you're in or out, or like, hey, who wants coffee beans I'm ordering today?
And it's kind of just have to respond, and if you don't, then like you might get left behind.
And like we told you to respond or not, and so
so I think we found our groove that way, and like it's almost like we know when it's like appropriate to have some like funny chitter chatter in the group chat, and then sometimes it's like this is all business. You know,
and also we have like sub group chats where like
we do?
Well, it's mostly because Kevin, you're the one who doesn't always love the
Ben and I have a subgroup
do.
that never there's no text
we've
that
got
go
one
between
called the River Vixens.
We got River Vixens. We got
Green
TV watching. We've got Green Gables over here.
Yeah, we've got one with Steph.
I think you guys all have group chats with each other in every configuration.
I have a group chat with you. No, I have one that's just me and you, and it's always about like art projects and like church projects.
Just me and you is not a group text.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of personality.
We have one
where
Meredith, me, and you, because one time you had to apologize to us.
I did, because I was a jerk. What did I do?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you
is that expectations based?
I think we were talking about like relation. Look, we were talking about.
Was that pushing you?
No. I was just saying like we were talking about a sensitive
subject,
and you spoke on something that you didn't have like the perspective to speak out if you didn't have the experience. And you're like, here's my opinion, and we were just like, you don't get to say that because you didn't have that life experience. And you're like, I think I do. And then later you're like, no, you're right. I actually don't get to speak for those people.
And then never was
that
group chat used again.
It's called the group.
Just like the sorry women.
The shame chat. The I was an idiot.
No, that's
chat.
okay.
No, but
Which
then like
good.
you guys want me to make art now and then, so like, hey, can you do something for? And we've used it since then.
Yeah. But there's another thing like expectations based is like you will do and say stupider things with your housemates than you will with most of your friends, and definitely with your family, because you're just around each other so much. So I need to know, like, I'm a person that has to work out bad ideas out loud. I can't work them out when I'm talking in front of people because that's a terrible time. And I can't work them out on the internet because the internet is a ruthless god. But you guys are people that I can be like, here's a thought, and just be like, talk about something. And if Mare and Meg, for example, in this conversation are like, no, you can't say that. No, you're wrong about that. It's like, you both have never lied to me before.
Yeah, it's like you both love me and we trust each other, and I can't have a bad opinion with you, and I know I get realistic feedback.
And so like the expectation of I can say something and be wrong, like where do you get safe spaces like that where you can say something and test out ideas and have people that are in your corner who are going to not judge you harshly for it, but are going to say like, let's be accountable to each other for the way that we talk about each
housemates, being housemates, like there is just such a potential for real intimacy that I think a lot of people crave with like a romantic partner. And like, if you don't have just one person to offload onto, it's really hard to find. And it's funny because you kind of get the best of both worlds where maybe your family situation, maybe you had close family relationships and you could have really real talk, but maybe also there was just, really extreme hierarchies or expectations within those. So you can't actually voice yourself. So when you choose your house family, when you choose your housemates, you are able to develop that depth of intimacy because it's with people that you trust and you have agency as an adult, and you're capable, and you are able to find your voice a little more. And so then surround yourself with people who want the best for you, who you want the best for. It's a two-way street. So, I mean, in my experience, I think I'm a better person because I live with you guys. And that's because we do the daily hard work of figuring out expectations and boundaries. I think those are both really big ones.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the expectations that we work through are like super, super practical. And I think that that's okay. Like sometimes it feels like it's not meaningful, but I think there's so much meaning in all that little nitty gritty stuff.
Yeah, there's
like,
never one giant conversation.
No.
And it's close. It's like every day.
Yeah, and even the ways that you show that you care for people, like filling up the kettle or something like that. When you come home and someone's put out the recycling, it's like, oh, like that actually speaks volumes to like you're considering our family, and you know that other people might be busy and you had a spare moment, and it's like, wow, I feel so thought of. And then that even like opens the gate for me to be in a better mood or like to be more vulnerable. And it's kind of like that like dumb old saying of like sex begins in the kitchen.
It's totally
I know.
What? I've never heard
That's like a marriage thing.
Is that like just
Gross.
in your
Never
marriage?
It's
heard
gross.
that.
Oh,
Sex
now I
begins
think
in
you
the
guys have
kitchen.
had sex in our kitchen.
Oh, we have definitely had sex in that kitchen, but before you were there, when we first got that island in the middle of we got that island in the middle of the table.
Meg is
just for
As
the
far
record,
as, as far as I'm
Meg just
concerned,
went bright red and just uttered a bunch
Let's
of sounds
list
like
off the places in this house we've had sex.
That is a thing that people say, like that married people say, that like
Yeah.
the intimacy
Hilarious.
for each other begins in like the small
Small
practical things,
service.
Yeah.
like blushing. Yeah.
We have actually,
we hope
guys,
What a
guys have a
ridiculous
very
phrase
you
to
guys
boil
know
it
that
down
Meg and I
to,
have had
though.
sex?
Yeah. They don't know. Meredith still thinks we found Clementine in the garden.
Oh, we did. She was planted and we picked her out.
Did I say that one time? What did you say? And then I was like, I'm not stupid. I know you found her in the garden.
But no, it is those
I was kidding.
small
but they thought
acts
it was.
of thoughtfulness that are like,
Yeah.
oh,
You
you
care
are
about
thinking
me.
about me when I'm not just in front of you.
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Ben, you
remembered
haven't
me.
given a story or reflection.
Oh,
Do you have any
I like.
particulars?
I mean, I have some nasty ones, but I like. There are also ones like. No, let's not get into that. But like little things where I'm like, oh yeah, I like. It's just a duty and a respect. Like, like even if we haven't necessarily communicated the expectation, like I'm thinking in my head, okay, like if I do this or if I do that, like for instance, the bathroom. Like every guy who shaves ever will leave hairs around like the sink.
It is gross. I love you, but
and-
it's gross.
and I try so hard to make sure that there's no hairs around the sink. It's just one of those things that I know people hate. But like in my head, nobody has really ever articulated, you know, up to a certain point that, yeah. Steph sent me a video once, but
Yeah.
that's besides the point.
But it's also
That,
we
like-
have two sinks in that bathroom. I'm not gonna lie, I've never used
Meredith
the
and
sink
I
on your
actually
side.
use
Yeah,
the other
I-
We've
sink.
just migrated naturally.
Really? That's so interesting
Yeah.
because I only use the
Thank you
sink
for
on the
still
one
cleaning.
side.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know, and
Yeah.
I don't use it.
Yeah, but it's so interesting because like it always it always looks like your sink is the one that's never used, and the other
'Cause
sink is
it's
the one that
clean.
is always used. And I'm like, do we all just use the one sink and not the other one? No. Okay.
Again, people's
Anyways,
different
but like even just having it in the back of your mind, like, okay, this is a shared space. Like if I were to hazard a guess about what your expectations are for the current status of like any given room, right? Any given shared room, kitchen, bathroom, you know, foyer, whatever. I can usually pick up like the point where like Steph is becoming uncomfortable with the amount of clutter,
Yeah.
or Mare is becoming uncomfortable with the amount of clutter, or you know, way down the road, Ben is becoming
Yeah, I
uncomfortable
feel
with
like
the amount of
I
clutter.
feel like I'm off a little higher.
Yeah.
So how do you
Steph
guys,
is like
how do
the
you guys
top
communicate
bar.
those like to one another so it's not just a guessing game? Because there's always going to be a
Yeah,
guessing game. but-
there's a bit of a guessing game, but like
I feel like it's
Whoa.
usually Steph first.
Yeah.
Will be like,
So we actually have
Hey, guys.
in
Yeah.
the last couple months.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys actually know about this, Kevin and Meg, but we actually have a calendar in our Google calendars that notifies you when it's your week, and you have from
Yeah.
Monday to Thursday to clean. And in the notes section of the thing, it's the expectation of what is supposed to be cleaned by the time you're
This
done.
is for your bathroom.
Yeah.
This is
those
for our
are
bathroom.
good expectations.
Yeah.
oh, I think it was my week, but I was house sitting this.
Yeah.
So
week.
it's
Sorry.
just
guess what? It was
and you
my
know what?
week the week
Honestly,
before, and I didn't do it either.
from
Terrible
it
housemates.
honestly
But
probably
now
it
you can
doesn't-
be mad.
It
Yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't get done all the time, but I feel like
Yeah.
it does more than it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that having those expectations out there of what is expected means that when someone does go
Yeah.
and clean it, they clean it properly, and it's cleaned
Yes.
like the way that, you know, we always say, like resetting the space, like it's
Yeah.
resetting the bathroom back
Yeah.
to zero. And I think that I know when I see those kinds of things and I think like, oh, like the bathroom wasn't cleaned by Thursday night, I have the decision to be like, well, should I ask the person and say like, hey, Ben, like you haven't cleaned by Thursday night. Are you able to get it done today? Because we have the expectation in place where like if I come to you, like it was communicated. It's a fair thing for me to say.
You're allowed to be upset because you've set really clear expectations.
To bring it up.
Yes.
Right.
But at the same time, if I don't say it, I have to choose in that moment to not be upset with you.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I am not going to take the responsibility of following up on the unclarified expectations, I have to decide that I can't only partially let it go and let go of the hard part for me, but I have to let go of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And a little part of me is always like, well, maybe one time I don't want to clean the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like over time, as you are living with people, you get to know, like with Steph, I know if I tell her an expectation once, like she will remember it for the rest of her life.
Until
but with Kev, it's like, no, but like with me, it's the same thing. It's just like, it's not, they're not dumb. They're not mean. That's no negative quality. It's just their brain is wired differently. We're like, oh, I just have to like remind them once a week. And that's how they throw it into the mix and throw it into their routine.
Kev is that guy in like Fantastic Mr. Fox where it's like, he was like, I told you to bring the blueberries. And he's like, no, you didn't. He's like, look at your hand.
Kylie.
On your hand, it says, bring the blueberries.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kevin's like, oh, shoot.
Because you have so much on the go, right?
What I think is interesting about that is, I have a lot on the go. And I'm just also naturally...
your brain doesn't have space for it all the time.
I'm not very good at remembering those kind of details.
I feel like you and me are wired that way.
But what's interesting is it shifts the realistic or unrealistic.
Yeah.
It's actually not realistic for someone to tell me something one time and for them to expect I will never make the mistake again.
Totally.
But it is realistic if you tell me one time that you need something to be done and it's communicated. It's realistic that if I don't do it, you'll tell me a second time and that I will say, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. And I will get it. It just takes a couple times.
It's also
there's
good
that
to be
dance
specific.
between
Because there's such a
and
difference between
realistic.
like, hey Kev, you live in this household. I think you like it to be clean, so I'd like you to start cleaning the bathroom. And hey Kev, you live in this household. I think you like it to be clean. I'd like you to clean the bathroom this week.
This last week, we had a party for you, for your birthday, and Steph was like, can you clean the bathroom? Texted me individually, can you clean the downstairs bathroom as contribution to the party by Saturday? Done. Did it, no problem, no hesitance. Because it was such a crystal clear, and part of it's that you know me well enough to say, here's how Kevin
really needs the structure,
expectations communicated.
And it's like, if I put out a list of like, here's the things that need to get done, someone claims something, it's stuff gets missed.
We've tried that. It doesn't always work.
It doesn't work, but
like the last day, we're like, I guess I'll do this.
Knowing people and being able to communicate realistic expectations, to use your word, is like, for example, like, I asked Ben if he could bake a cake. Obviously, Ben is incredible in the kitchen, and that's fantastic. But decorating the cake isn't necessarily something that you jumped on board with.
Right. It's not necessarily something that I really enjoy. I can do it, but it doesn't bring me joy. And so, like, it's just an unrealistic expectation to be like, hey, Ben, can you do this amazing thing that's something that you don't really care about? And so it was very easy to be like, actually, Meg loves decorating things like that and making things beautiful and cute. So, Meg, how about you decorate the cake? And Kevin, you can't do it. I think those.
Wait, finish that sentence.
Everything.
Hey, Kevin.
You can do everything perfectly in the whole world, especially clean the downstairs bathroom.
I can do any mindless task that's repetitive, and I can do it for a long time.
It's like, it's Kevin, you're the first person to cut people off from doing dishes.
I will do dishes for an hour and a half. I can just watch a comedy special.
Yeah,
fine.
I will say one of the saving graces of our house, because we don't have a chore chart. Maybe we should, and maybe we will, but right now we don't.
Gables has a chore chart.
Yeah. Is that we host so many events because
we host a lot.
Yeah, because I do feel like there's this sort of natural clutter that builds up, and then like you said, setting back to zero is like probably once a month we have a party, and it's like boom, we're setting the house back to zero. Like I'm putting my sewing machine away. We're doing all these things,
sweeping up the floors,
sweeping the floor, getting all the dust out, and it's like, and then we clean it from the party, and you're like,
okay, so here's a good time to segue into this back half of this episode. Because we're already halfway through.
Ooh.
What?
We just
lots of talk about cleaning. This is what you tuned in for.
I know people are like,
cleaning.
People are like, oh my gosh, finally the cleaning podcast I've been waiting for.
I want to say one thing about being passive aggressive.
Oh yes.
I think that being passive aggressive definitely has two sides to it, because sometimes you'll ask somebody, like, let's say I say like, oh hey, do you mind doing such and such? And then they're like, oh no, that's fine. And then in your head you're like, oh, they're being so passive aggressive right now. Then I think that might be true, but I think there's also like your response to people's, if you think they're being passive aggressive, because I can think that and be, oh, why are they being like that? That's so annoying. Like, why don't they just say what they really think? Or I can say, okay, thank you.
Right. I take it as gospel truth.
I'm trusting what you say to be what you mean.
Yeah.
And if it's not, that's
And then
on
they
you.
have to, they have to
Yeah.
show up
Well, and
to
when
it.
Steph moved in, I remember we said this, I think with all of us, but especially with Steph because she was coming in a bit later than everybody else. We said, like, just so you know, we're very big on communication and we will be more direct than not. So, like, if we ever say something and it just comes off as cold, and this was setting expectations.
Yes.
We don't mean it to be cold. We just would rather say
It's
it directly
direct.
and deal with how we're actually feeling and thinking
You're right.
than
And on the
dance
other
around
hand, if
it.
we haven't said something, like, don't keep
It's
yourself up
good.
at night about
Yeah,
it.
like we will tell you if we're upset or if
Yes.
we're frustrated or if we feel whatever.
Which is like never an environment that I had lived in before. And to the potential opposite side of things, I had spent a lot of time with people or in places where I felt like I was never really sure where I stood with other people and what the expectations were. And so I think it was a bit of a learning curve for me to get into that, to just communicate properly and like to kind of watch what other people were doing and realizing that like I was communicating not in a great way sometimes, and knowing still that these people had grace with me and were willing to like respond directly made me think like, oh, if I just say things directly instead of like beating around the bush about it, it'll just accomplish the same thing. They're going to continue to respond the same way. So I might as well like free myself from the guilt and also like embarrassment potentially of just like not owning up to things.
Yeah,
Just
and I
ask for
think
what
it's
you
like
want.
an opportunity to kind of be surprised by how gracious the other people are. Like
Yes.
more often than not,
Yeah.
you let's say you say like, guys, like I'm really swamped and I have to work late. It's my night to cook. I don't think I'm going to be able to cook. And you send that message and you're like, they're going to be mad at me and I'm such a failure and I'm letting everyone down. Nobody else is called in like this and like I don't know what to think. And then everyone's response is like, yo, guy, like just relax. It's all good.
Like
You know,
in our
I'd love to
unintentional
cook tonight,
community,
yeah.
like our bar's low. It's cool. You let us know.
all good.
It's
Yeah.
totally
That's
fine.
the realest
You
thing.
can
is
cook
like,
another night or you can just not cook at all.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I did move in
Absolutely.
with low expectations, I think, because I just didn't know really who on a personal level I was moving in with. I had like an idea of everyone, but then I knew also we had really different, like we each had different jobs and rhythms and routines, and so I was like, I don't even know how much I'll see these people. It's a really nice house, so I'm glad to live here now. But I just like was kind of starting from zero. I was absolutely not in a place where I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this amazing house. We're going to be so close. We're going to have
family.
this idea of, like Kevin, Meg they were like, we're really trying to like choose who we think would be a good fit. And that's why we're inviting you, because we think with the other people we've invited to live with us, the dynamic would work. And I was just like, okay, I guess we'll see. We'll find out.
Do you even know me?
Yeah. Exactly. I really didn't like, I can't even remember if I'd really had a conversation with you, Meg, before I moved in with you. And I remember it's so funny because I remember we talked into it a few months into it and we both admitted to each other, we're like, you're so cool. I don't think, like, due to my like lifestyle and my rhythms, I don't think I would have ever found it possible to like be friends with you, to like hang out with you, because we just operate on different different circles, different levels. Yeah. But like, man, I love being your housemate. I'm so glad I'm your housemate. Nice. And like, I get to have this wonderful close relationship with Meg, who like, not because I don't like her as a person, but like, we probably wouldn't be friends if I wasn't living here, because just like where and how we see each
I'd
other.
be so intimidated by you, Meredith.
Really?
Now that I live with you, I'm not at all.
Yeah, oh my gosh, she sucks. Please don't do that now.
Big old softie.
Once you see somebody with Clem, you're like, oh, they're just a softie. Look
It's
at
true.
them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's our like two big things so far.
Yeah.
Like clear communication, which is hard. It's a thing you learn. It's a thing you learn if you're going to keep your marriage alive. But it's a thing that isn't reserved for marriage. It's actually reserved for people that you spend a lot of time with.
It requires a lot of extra energy.
Yes.
But I remember, like, I've even had this
but
with
not misplaced energy.
No, it's good.
Right.
Work smart,
it's
not
absolutely
hard.
well invested energy.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about
Because you're not
like,
trying to be best friends with each other.
you're trying to like make sure that you're upholding that relationship really well of like being housemates together. But the other thing about that is like, if you spend the energy on clarifying expectations and then responding to those expectations that have been like clarified and shared with you, you're navigating away from all of the power politics. Like you just get outside of all of that situation where it's like, okay, that person hasn't said that. They're probably like resentful and like this is changing the tone of the
And you just feel like the
relationship
storm
and like
clouds in
What
there.
are
it
they
becomes
not
a mystery,
saying? And-
right?
yeah, it's so
And then
true.
are they going to hold this over my head when such and such time comes
Are
up
they
or whatever?
secretly having this other conversation?
Yeah,
Reciprocation.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you clarify all those expectations and have them set and have them articulated, and then you have grace around those things like outside of that, it's in
It's
such
not
a way
rigid.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
flexible.
Right.
It
Like
breathes.
it comes through different seasons in life, and it comes through different moods and stuff like that, and like different times in and times out and that kind of thing. So that's really like just clarifying and like maintaining and cultivating expectations together as a group with like lots of grace surrounded is really, really helpful.
There's a summary of if you want a successful intentional community, be clear in your communication and lower your expectations. Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, so here's a game. I'm going to name off different practical things that expectations affect, and you all throw out some thoughts on how that functions in our household and how expectations play into it. So let's start with one we've already touched on. Meg, you were segueing into it a little while ago. Parties and being social.
Okay.
How do expectations play into it?
Yeah. So I would just start with the idea that like Kevin and I, part of our mission in owning a home in the first place was that it was a place that was sort of like a vessel for community. And so it being a social place, a welcoming place, a hospitable place, and also like a fun party place is like part of our sort of like the DNA of our family.
Yeah.
And so we did actually, when everybody moved in, say that to you guys because it's like if you're not down with that, then you won't like it.
No. I think with that, like I love that you guys like host so much because as an introverted person, there's nothing better than being able to go to a party. But then if you need to take a time out, go up to your room for 10 minutes, read a book. Holy Hannah, it is the best.
Yes.
And there is a flip side. Like there's been a few, like I work a job where I have to get up at 5 and there's been some nights where I have to leave the party early and it is like still bumping until midnight. I'm like, cool, I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm going to be tired at work tomorrow. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, I have people in my house. I'm not going to home alone. Like I'm safe at home. My friends are enjoying themselves. There's coffee at work tomorrow. I'll survive. Like you just have some nights where you're like, I'm not like, it's not going to be a perfect compromise. We're not all going to win this one, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't need to win them all.
And there's definitely sort of a understanding of like the person who decided to have the party and the person who's like hosting the party is like ultimately in charge, and anyone else who wants to go to bed while the party's happening is like you're free to do so.
Host.
No,
Yeah,
you're not
you have to be the
hosting, and that's
person,
such a nice thing because like sometimes people will host things, and I am in a mood to be social, but I'm not in a mood to organize anything. I just wander in, and all these friends are there, and it's so nice, and I'm like,
I don't think I've planned a single party at our house, but I just get to benefit from people
You
coming
walk downstairs,
over.
you're like, ooh, charcuterie.
Yeah,
And
don't
like,
mind if I do.
you guys have had like
burgers tonight?
baby showers. And I'm like, hello, ladies. And I
like,
like
no,
take a cocktail and a bit of charcuterie and go back and play video
Exactly.
games in my room.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
I think everyone looks at me. Do I host a lot of parties potentially? I think the thing that has like been really helpful is like knowing that that in general the answer is yes to those kinds of things. Like, do we want to have people over? Are we okay with having this happen? I think like having the for myself, I know that like if I want to have people over to the point where like it would make it shift where people could use the house. Like, for example, if people had planned on working in the kitchen and then I planned on having people in the living room, I kind of have to clear it, like just throw it out there. And like, if I want to host a party or if something comes up or I want to do a birthday dinner or something like that, still throwing it out there and saying like, everybody cool with that. Not just from like Kevin and Meg's perspective as the homeowners, but also like everyone else's expectations for the day. And you never know what's going on with that kind of thing.
Especially if your hangout is like kind of determined by like you're planning to have a night on the back porch or something like with a friend. It's like you don't need to ask anyone's permission to have a friend over ever. But if you really want it to be on the back porch,
you want to reserve that
you might
spot.
want to call dibs on that.
It's a little bit of dibs. There's a little
And it's harder in
And there's
winter.
times you'll be like, hey, we're having a party. You guys can totally come through. Like, hey, I'm actually having a friend over and like we were just going to, talk about some stuff. So maybe don't interrupt. Maybe just stay in the restaurant.
And I think winter is much harder because
It
it's
is
like,
harder. We have less
hey,
space.
we have one room because our
Our
main
house
floor
like
is
doubles
like a
in
big
size in the summertime.
Yeah, because
It's
we have a big
amazing.
backyard and a front porch,
And a
so you can
front
have
porch,
3 private conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the winter, I think it is like I'm having somebody over and I want privacy and I also
You
don't want
stay
you
in
to
your
eavesdrop.
room.
Can you go to your room and close your door and put a pillow under the bottom of it? So I mean,
We've
that's
done
one of the
that.
perks of living downtown, though, is we live around the corner from a street with bars and restaurants.
You can go out if you want to.
And I imagine if you live in the suburbs or in like the country.
I have a car that you can drive anywhere
That's
with.
true. Go to Montana, so you're probably fine. But I mean, there are benefits to the geography that we live in. But in the winter, one of the negatives is it's very cold in Canada. There's a lot of snow, and the house shrinks. And so you are kind of banishing people to their bedrooms if you want to do something, and that's okay. But you got to ask.
Or you're
gotta
opening up your hangout to potentially be interrupted by more people.
Right.
And you have to be okay with that too.
Yeah, if you deal with
And
that.
sometimes your friends are like, oh, okay, so now other people are joining us. And it's like, that's
or we
just
like
my
host a small group or something from church or a church event, which I host a fair amount of, although less now that we have our own space. But you kind of got to clear that with everybody, or else you're going to get a lot of resentment quickly when it's like, I came home and there was 20 people and no one told me that was going to happen.
There is like a little bit, everyone's had those times where you like thought, you're like, oh, I just had such a hard day and I just can't wait to go home and like do these quiet things. And then you walk in and there's like 6 people in the house. Like we are 6 people. So having another 6 people
a party and a
is
half.
just, that's basically a small get together immediately. Yes. And so when there's a whole bunch of people in the house that you don't expect, it's like, sometimes it can be like, oh, this isn't what I want right now. But then also understanding that like I have my own room, and we are very fortunate in that our bedrooms are actually like pretty decent size and are separated enough that like
Except for Clementine's.
where you can go upstairs and like separate yourself off, but then also like maybe later come down and you like that. But I mean, we all have those times where you have people over and it just happens and you're just hanging out. And so it goes both ways. Like I have grace with you, you have grace with me.
Good segue.
Talk about the sweet and utter joy of realizing that you're home alone.
Oh my gosh.
It's just crazy. It's so surreal.
I love you guys, but when you're not
in the middle of a
there-
city, we live next to a giant like thoroughfare, and it's still like it's silent as a
Condos and
church.
apartments on both sides. And
If no one else is
somehow-
home, I might as well be in like the desert. It's
Oh,
incredible.
you open the windows and you don't play any music.
Oh no, I turn the
Like,
music way up.
Oh,
I love it.
Yeah.
I put on like a little Mozart or
That's
something.
my favorite
like
thing is when
subtle.
I know that Kevin and Meg have had the house to themselves for the evening, and also that they're working on bills. This happened once or twice where I was biking home and I could hear the pop punk from like down the block. That's their focus music.
Yeah.
Is like,
it's like new emo,
Blink
go.
182. Yeah.
Okay, so good segue then to bedrooms and private space. How does that work in our household? And are there any thoughts around expectations around how you have your own private space and also how we share public space on the main floor?
I think just like the most basic thing is just doors open or doors closed.
Yeah.
You always underestimate
Yeah.
that, and I feel like it. If someone's got their door closed, like for example, like oftentimes Ben will have his door closed, and then I'll kind of think to myself like, should I knock on his door or just like send him a text from his room kind of thing. Even like to the point where I'm like, if Ben shut his door, it's because he wants privacy. And like for me, I'll keep my door open all the time because I will tell you, there's nothing better than like a little couple patters of footsteps and that little curly head sticking her head in your door. And you're like,
Let's go wake her up.
I'm hanging with her right now.
Third episode, the Queen.
yeah.
but like it kind of like puts you in a position where you're like, oh, I want to see people. Or like if you're working in the kitchen table, like it's like, oh, I'm prepared that this might be interrupted kind of thing. Versus like if you separate yourself from your room, it's like just a thing where it's like, oh, maybe I really want, as a social person, as we've talked about, I really often want to like, I'm like, oh, I want to talk to Meg about this, or I want to talk to Mara about this. It's like, well, they've asked for privacy and I need to respect that. And if I really need to reach out about something, they have their phones with them probably. That's the world we live in. So I can send them a message.
Text messages are a good option in that. And I think, you can definitely tell when people are in seasons where they just need like their own space and they need to chill.
Yep.
And it's good to just like try not to read into that, where it's like, okay, so 3 nights in a row, this person has gone to their room and sort of like retreated. And so maybe they just need a little more care right now because they're obviously like, maybe they're overworked or maybe they're feeling sad or whatever. But then also it's like, maybe they need to be invited to something. Maybe they need something to pull them out of it. And it's just like kind of a cool thing to be aware of with the doors open, doors closed thing. Is like, it's a very black and white thing of like,
Can we get into the practicalities of just how the house is laid out? For anyone listening, trying to figure out how that works, and do you guys feel like the layout of the house works?
Yeah, so like when you walk into our house, we have a big front porch. When you walk into our house, our living room is right at the front of the house. It's like big and open. We have a fireplace. We have all these plants. Our dining room is like, it's kind of like an open concept through to our dining room. And our dining room has a giant table that can fit like 10 people. And we'll all always have like 4 projects on the go sitting on the dining room table.
2,300 cookies.
We made so many cookies for this fundraiser, you guys. And then if you walk through the hall, you're in the kitchen, and it's not huge, but it can fit all of us if we're all working in there
It's
together.
got a little bar area, which is nice.
Yes, it's got a little shelf with all our coffee stuff on it, some plants again, and then it's got a kitchen island, and then, the stove and everything. And then in the backyard, we've got a patio with like a set. We've got a couple like chairs in the backyard and like we've got a big backyard, a big garden patch.
Yeah.
We can kind of see and talk to our neighbors around there, which is nice. And then on the second floor, my room's at the very back, and then Steph and Ben are on that floor, and now Clementine is in the office that we converted into a bedroom. So we're all on the second floor. We have a washroom that Steph and Ben and I share. And then up in the attic, Kevin and Meg converted that into their loft. They have their own like washroom. Like they really have their own like unit up there.
Yeah.
Clem was living with them for the first year.
And that was tough because suddenly
Yeah.
our private space in the house, like we all have our own private space,
Had a sleeping baby
had a
in it.
sleeping
Not.
baby in it.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when she went down to her own room and we could turn on the lights again at night in our
Yeah.
room, it was a game changer for
Because
our own
it was-
sense of space.
That room was your office for a while. And then
Yeah.
that ended up switching and you ended up moving your office space upstairs.
Yeah.
And like we can watch movies with you guys now. We can play games up there. You can just like hang out in your own space if you want to.
Yeah, I
at
think
night.
in general, I would never go up to the loft unless you invited me. Like for
Exactly.
me, that,
'Cause
like,
that's
that's just
your room.
your
It's like your
special
bedroom,
space.
too.
It's your
Same
bedroom.
kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Something,
Yeah.
if I can jump in, something
ahead.
that Tim Dickow said, who's the pastor of a church in Vancouver, the guy I was mentioning before this, he's had, I think I recall him saying 100 people living with he and his wife and their family in Vancouver because they bought a
Not
house
all
when
at
it was
once,
affordable.
like throughout the years.
Yeah.
They've
Can
been
you
doing
imagine?
communal living
They
for
had a
30
commune.
years.
Yeah.
They've been doing it for 30 years and had
I
a lot
might
of
butcher
turnover.
his quote. It was in the Good God interview I did with him. If anyone listening to this ever listened to that, but I believe it was, he said, every human being needs solitude, but we don't need privacy.
Yes.
Like privacy is kind of a Western myth that we all need
Yeah.
our own little private space.
Yeah.
What we really need is space to have solitude, which might be
Yeah.
a hike, which might be a walk, which might be time in your room alone. But this idea that there's a part of our life that's private from
Yes.
everyone else
Yeah.
is a bit of a like new idea and a bit of a myth as well. And I
I'm
thought
going to
was
say that
interesting in
like
light of
I
this.
love that quote and I love that distinction. And I think that like I personally have had to practice that because I love my room. I love living in our house, but and I don't resent this, but like my house is or my room is very small. It's part of an addition that was put on the house later. There's no insulation, so it's freezing in the winter and it's boiling in the summer. So I actually for a lot of the year I can't really spend time in my room because it's really not comfortable at all. I don't have a closet, so like it's really easy for there to be clutter because I'm always trying to like figure out how to store things. So sometimes I can get overwhelmed in my own personal space. And so through the winter, a lot of the time I'll bring my sketchbook downstairs and I'll work at the kitchen table. And so I've had to learn, like, I think I'm an introvert. I grew up in a big family where there's a lot of like, you know, you're always jockeying to get the mic kind of, and you're always, you know, lots of big personalities. And so I know how to hold myself within, like, kind of have my own little calm within, you know, storms going on around me. So like the house can be busy, people can be active, but if I can find a moment alone with my sketchbook at the table, even if people are like having conversations or busy around me, I'll just put on headphones if I need to, but like there is a way to still carve out personal time for myself, even if it's not going up to my room and spending time there, because when I was growing up, I had a big bedroom and that was kind of where I'd go and shut myself off to. But I can't really do that in my current room. And so I've had to figure out other ways to find that solitude and to find comfort in the communal spaces. And it makes me so thankful that we do have shared living space that is so great for hosting a lot of people, because it means that I can find a corner of the couch while everyone is still downstairs and still have my own time and not feel, cramped. I was living in a communal house before I moved to Canada, and it was wonderful, but it was really small. It was like the whole house was like the size of our living room, I swear. And I just spent most of my time not at home. And I would have liked to be home more, but like it was, we'd have these moments of really wonderful, we'd share a meal together or something, or in the summer we'd be out, on the porch a lot. But it was like, I had to be away from the house because it literally couldn't support all of us all the time with what we needed in terms of like an oasis.
And probably a worthwhile thing for people listening to this, if they are thinking about living in communal housing, is to say, like, take stock of the space you have.
Space is
And
important.
I'd say don't be afraid to start smaller and go bigger. Like, we had 2 housemates, and then we went, oh, this is manageable. We could add a third person.
Yeah.
And even then it was, do you want to move in temporarily? Because you were looking for a spot temporarily. So like there is nothing to achieve. I think that people have this feeling of like, if I'm going to be a good intentional community person, or like if you're people of faith, like if I'm going to be a good Christian or a good whatever it is, I need to pack it full, and we have to all eat meals every night together and have our prayer times and have all of this stuff. And it's like, you're not earning anything. There's nothing to earn here. start.
It's not a project.
You can start small. This is not a project, and there's no badge of honor. You're not better if you live in community or worse if you don't. And so, yeah, like start with less people and see what the physical space can handle. And don't be afraid to like call it if it's just like, yep, this is as many people as we can reasonably do in this while having good mental health and good relationships together.
I will say that like if you are a married couple and you're thinking about having one single person live with you, that from my experience takes a little bit more clarification of expectations because it can end up feeling as a single person like you're just a boarder. And there's certain times where you're imposing on the couple space and like you have to be on your own. So I think having those clear expectations of like this is a communal space and then also holding yourself accountable to that, like am I treating this space as accessible to everyone versus like do I think that like we have more of a right to it than they do because it's a family and we're a larger portion of the people. I think that's just something to hold in mind if you are looking into doing community living in any capacity to like as a married couple consider the idea of just having two people in there because sometimes you just need to be with another person.
Because when you, before the three of us moved in, you were living, Kevin and Meg were living with another couple, and that really functioned as like 2 units instead of 4 whole people because you guys had these really close, you know, where each other's
I think that's why we needed the second living room was because we needed a place where like each couple could hang out and
they can go watch a movie, and the loft wasn't renovated then.
No.
So we had limitations. And the thing is, there's no magic bullet.
No.
It's just you got to know what you've got.
It is easy. Yeah, it's easy if you're not paying attention to fall into like a hierarchy of dynamics.
Ben, you lived with a number of single people.
Yeah.
At the same time, how did that interact in the same way, especially around expectations?
It was good, but I mean, none of us had like, we didn't have really, really active like social lives. So there was a lot of just like we all just kind of stayed home and watched movies and that kind of stuff. And it was very quiet, not nearly as social. And it was really interesting because when I moved in here, I like had a couch and I had a bunch of other stuff at the other place, expecting to use it and never used it. And then when I moved in here, I was like, man, I could have totally brought that other couch that I have. And I just didn't bring it. But like people actually inhabit this space on a regular basis. Whereas we like hardly ever use the living room at the other places. So I thought that was really fascinating. It was also really interesting that like we have no like TVs or like PS4s or anything like that.
In
like,
I was going to
gaming
bring that up
systems.
too.
Yeah,
that's how I grew up, was without a
space.
TV in the main.
I mean, I have a
Yeah.
PlayStation 4 and a TV, so
Yeah.
I should
And-
clarify how that works.
Oh, we have two
And Steph
TVs
has a TV
and a
too.
PlayStation 2 or something.
But the main
we don't
floor.
have-
A PlayStation 3, Meredith.
I'm so
not
sorry.
a dinosaur.
Yeah.
She has
I'm just an
she has
old
an Atari. and
I think not having
I
a
don't know
TV
what
on the
any of
main
those things
floor,
are.
it's actually so interesting because we will bring down Steph's TV every once in a while and like people
play-
watch a
we'll
movie or
play
play
a
a game
game
and
or
it's very
something on it.
Yeah,
communal.
it's like a
Yeah.
special
It's a
thing.
special
Yeah.
thing, and like, let's say y'all are watching a movie and I'm
Yeah.
not interested in it.
Yeah.
It's totally fine because I've chosen not to participate, but
Yeah.
it really does like take over the space.
yeah, it's the
Totally.
fastest way to hijack a main floor is
Yeah.
to turn on your show,
Yeah.
which you're probably not wearing headphones. But even if
And
you
it
are,
just
the
drives
lighting
people out.
changes.
And it's like one thing to like watch a show while you're cooking, for example, because it's like you kind of have domain of the kitchen, so do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But I will find if I'm watching a show while I'm cooking and someone walks in, I'm like, I
Turn
think
it
I'm gonna
off.
turn it off.
Yeah.
'cause,
Yeah,
like,
what do I
don't
do?
wanna
Turn it off
do I
or-
talk to you?
Yeah.
Do I watch
Yeah.
the show? Do I keep watching the show? Like,
Yeah.
so,
Sometimes I'll say like, I'm just gonna watch this because I'm zoning. And
yeah,
like,
and people
but
get
it's
it. And it's totally
expectations.
fine.
Yeah. Or sometimes
Yeah.
it'll be like, I'm actually working out here. Would you mind putting on headphones for that?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
definitely
You can
like
still-
community and TV, it's hard to make them exist in the same spot.
Yeah.
Well, even
Yeah.
like there was a
Clementine's more
season.
interesting than anything on
Clem's
TV.
very interesting.
She's very fun
There's a
to
season
watch.
where Ben was watching a lot of Instagram videos,
Oh
and
yeah.
I would go
Kevin was going
crazy because it was just like when you're
I think
not
Ben's
visual.
just hard of hearing because he turns everything up so
He would turn up his
loud.
phone loud, but then when you're not watching it, it just sounds like and you're just like, I'm going crazy because at the other end of the main of this room is random sounds and somewhere
Right.
between
But he doesn't
5
feel that
seconds
because he
and 2
sees
minutes.
what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
And
just
I'm in
had
control
to,
of it too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just had this like, I'm upset. To quote Drake,
I didn't get that joke.
I'm feeling frustrated, and it was like, is it realistic
Right.
to not play audio off your phone on the main floor? Yes. Is it communicated? No.
Yeah.
And I had to have this like, put on your big boy pants and say like, hey Ben, it's not a big deal, and it's really my thing.
Yeah.
But I'm just feeling distracted and like frustrated by the random sounds.
Yeah.
Would you mind either watching in another room or
Turning it down.
putting on headphones or turning it way down? I don't think I gave that option. I was like,
Oh,
listen, man, like it's headphones.
Well, that's good. You know what you needed.
And I know what I need.
On or
and
off.
Ben was just like, oh. And I think you even said like, I'm not even enjoying this anyways.
Yeah,
it
it's so
was so
interesting
Didn't even
that like
register before.
But it was like
right?
reading a book on the main floor
Yeah.
takes up the couch or the seat you're in. And,
Yeah.
you know, like drawing your comics, Mayor, like takes up a little spot of the desk. But audio noise, like,
It's different.
and you guys we're all really good, I think, about saying like, can I put on this album? Would you mind if I put on this record?
Yeah.
Of just saying like, I want to make sure I'm not taking up space that is our space.
Yeah.
You just want to respect it.
And there's sometimes where you realize, you know what, there's a good thing happening and everyone's having fun, and I'm actually the one who needs to leave, which I think is okay too. You know?
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think there's definitely been times where in dealing with expectations, I have to square with my own shit, so to speak. Like I remember, and it was like months ago, it was probably in like early days of living here, but I came home once and like the front door was unlocked. And I think like someone was in the backyard, they'd come and they left it open for maybe like someone else to come in. And it was one of those things where later I found out that like for some people, like leaving a door unlocked for a period of time is like not that big a deal. But for me, I remember being like angry and upset about it because I'm just like, they don't care about the safety of this house. They don't care if a stranger comes in. This is like, I felt so...
Mayor has a fighting
Like,
stance.
I felt
on
like
right
hurt
now.
and violated. And I was just like, that's so irresponsible. That's so just like foolhardy.
Yeah.
And like, I think I walked in and I was like, the front door's unlocked. And whoever was in the backyard was like, oh yeah, like I left it for so-and-so. They're coming over for dinner or something. And over time, I just had to square with the fact that like, you know what, Meredith, like you have to trust your housemates. You can say that you feel safer with the door shut, but you also have to trust that like, they have your best interest at heart. You are safe here. They do love you. They do care about you.
I invited some murderers over.
Yeah.
So.
And a couple rabbit
Like, I left
dogs.
the door unlocked because I don't care if like a robber comes in.
Can,
and it's
can
like,
I throw this out too? Because
Sure.
it's on last week's theme of pros
Yeah.
and cons, but I didn't mention it. It's so
Yeah.
crucial as a homeowner.
yeah,
The safety you feel living in community is
Yeah.
unbelievably
Oh, true.
massive.
Yeah.
Meg and I lived for
Yeah.
years, the two of us. Like, I don't worry at night that someone's going to break in and murder my wife
Yeah.
and me. I used to work night shifts, so I was gone
Yes.
4 nights a week, and I would leave the house. And one time when we moved downtown, Meg and I lived across the street from a serial killer who murdered 2 people and
true.
would bike around the downtown
I've
and
already
stab
forgotten
people.
about that.
Yeah, true story. And I would leave every night. We didn't know the serial
until
killer
you
was there.
find out.
He wasn't like, "What's up? I'm a serial killer," and I'm like, "Cool. I work night shifts."
Hey, we're your
Yeah.
neighbors.
My wife is alone in the house.
She's alone in
I'll
there.
leave the door unlocked.
Climb on up. No, but it was like I felt so much safer leaving her for this job. But never mind, like we were gone again. I said this in one of the episodes, like for 2 weeks, and I didn't worry about a house getting broken into. We don't need a security. We have a security system. Whoever's listening to this online,
All you burglars.
monsters, you burglars. But like we just have people, and it's not even just us. It's often our friends. Like, but there's a safety to it. There's eyes on, and we live in a neighborhood
And
where
I just was talking, and like
it's amazing.
Yeah, we know our neighbors, which is so wonderful. But like I like on like a really deep level, it was like, okay, Meredith, like, do you trust these people that you live with every day? Do you really trust that they love you? Are you willing to put your best in, or are you still holding your guard up really high? Because at the end of the day, you don't think that this is like the best thing, and you're not actually giving enough of yourself because you are worried that they're not looking out for you too. And that was something that I did have to square with, especially in the early times of us living together.
Mayor, we're looking out for you.
Thank
We
you.
got your back.
And-
2 more or a couple more little things.
All right.
Can we talk? And we only got a few minutes left, so we're gonna have to keep going.
Okay.
Can we talk about the rules that we set up when people moved in?
love the
Do you guys
rules.
remember the rules?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
like 3 or 4.
That
of them.
was the most
I don't
anxiety
even like. I'm
inducing.
sure I live
Expectations.
by
The-
them,
the
but
introduction to that conversation was so hard.
Loved it.
Maybe Ben, you
Ben,
jumped
you
in.
loved it
start.
so
Like,
much.
Oh
introduction.
man, it was like
I literally
okay,
don't remember
so
the
You're in
rules.
it now.
I think was it before Mayor was in the house or
I think
after?
so. You
Yeah,
moved in-
before.
You moved in like a month.
Yeah, a couple of
Yeah.
weeks before. So I moved in probably like a couple days before Christmas.
Yeah.
And then Mayor moved in. I want to say
Mid-January, end of January, I think.
mid-January
Yeah.
or something like that. So, anyways, so Kevin set us down, and it was me and this other guy, Adam, who was living there at the time.
Yeah.
What up, Adam?
What up, Adam?
Shout out to Adam.
We hope you like Westdale. We
Yeah.
miss you.
And so Kevin Meg sat us down and they were like, okay, so we have something to talk about. I was like, I have been here for 4 days. What do you possibly have to talk about?
What did I do?
Yeah. There's no way that you could have an issue after 4 days. They're like, we just want to we just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we have the same clear rules and expectations, that there are some things that we're not going to screw around with. And so here are the rules. And so as far as I remember, unless maybe I've forgotten something, the rules are no drugs, no overnight visitors, I believe.
No sleepovers.
No sleepovers?
No romantic sleepovers.
Yeah.
Romantic sleepovers. Yeah, it's relevant.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't
no
think I was here
romantic
for this
sleepovers.
conversation. I don't remember
And I
it.
think there's one more, but I forget what it is.
Yeah.
I think it
No
was
drugs, no romantic sleepovers.
I think
and
it was
then-
about honesty or
It was
being
kind of the expectations thing.
this expectations thing.
Yeah. So basically, if you if you break either of those two, just cop to it. Just quick. Just say something. Just do it. Admit to it. Cop to it.
And with no it's such a funny bar. No drugs. It's okay,
No drugs.
summer
Hey,
camp.
Dad.
Yeah.
But it was just when people start dating, and this is, everyone has sexual ethics. That's a whole other conversation in this. But it was aside from sexual ethics or being people who are in a church together and might have some sort of shared overlap of sexual ethics.
Yes.
It was we just also don't want whatever's happening. Sometimes people just start sleeping over at each other's houses all the time when they're dating.
Yep.
And
That's true.
or sleeping over sometimes. Whatever is happening there is a whole other conversation. But that's suddenly a whole new person around. And it was just we need to make this clear. And drugs were a thing of some people might be like, oh, well, this is marijuana is going to be legalized super soon.
Yeah.
It's still not allowed in the house until it's legalized. And we'll have to revisit this conversation
exactly.
because it just adds an element of uncertainty and chaos that we don't want to
Absolutely.
deal with in this
And I
house.
think the benefit of creating something like rules is that it's not if you did something, then now you don't live here anymore.
Yeah.
It's more it sets the expectation of if you're not going to do these things, then let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it's a thing.
Yeah.
You know? So
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember there was one of those rules that I didn't abide by, and it wasn't because you guys came and you're like, hey, you broke the rule.
No.
But it was over time, it was realizing that these things were in state for my health, where I came to you guys and was like, hey, I need some accountability. I just need to pray over this with you guys and and to use, the Christian terms to confess to some of this stuff and have that accountability. And you met me where I was at, and it was really good. And it was one of those things where it's these guidelines are here. These expectations are here because we do believe that they contribute to the health of the entire household. And if you mess up on them, that's only going to cause you harm potentially, but it's not going to end the world, and you can still live here, and we can figure out the next steps.
For sure.
Which is wonderful as someone who has had experiences of breaking rules and then really being burned and being worried that I can't screw up again.
Yeah.
I think that rules are a really great way to be okay, if this is a thing that we'd like to talk about if this issue comes up.
When it
Right,
just become
exactly.
opportunities for grace together. Some of the sweetest moments I've had in my friendships are when people are I didn't live up to my own hopes for myself, or I didn't live up to what we had hoped for together and or rules we had set up. And you get to be I forgive you, or you get to hear someone say I forgive you. Back to our conversation of me emailing you guys and being I screwed up in this conversation. That is the beautiful kind of jagged edges of community, are the ways that you disappoint each other.
Even
and
the
then you
feeling
get
of
to forgive
disappointing
each other.
someone is in a sad way, a really beautiful thing, because you're dang, it hurts me that I hurt you. And
I want you
does
to
it
be
feel
well.
good?
I think people have often come up to him and oh, that doesn't seem fair. Why don't you you could just do it this way, or why don't you just do this, or it doesn't seem fair that anyone would put that on you. And for me it's I don't have to think about where I stand on these two issues, which may or may not be in line of where the rules sit, but it's I knew what they were when I moved in, and my choice is just to follow them because I knew what I was getting myself into when I moved in here. And it's not it's you sign a lease to pay for certain things. I didn't have to sign a lease, but we agreed to do these things. And I was okay, well, that just takes the guesswork out of it. I agreed to do this. It's not a matter of if I go back and break one of these rules, like I have done wrong. I have broken my lease with you guys.
Yeah.
And that's on me. It's not a thing where I can like come back and be like if you were to be like, oh, Steph, you like went on a Coke binge and you're not supposed to do that. And then I couldn't be like, well, I don't think those rules are fair. It's like I already had the opportunity to say something against it, and it's just very clearly that I am in the wrong. It's not it's a black or white issue.
Communicable, realistic
and I think that's where, and I don't know that we've talked about this, but the homeowner versus renter situation actually
worked on the list.
Because like,
I don't feel a power dynamic of that. I haven't felt that in our household.
Absolutely.
It's
and I
so
think
equitable, which is super generous
because,
of you guys who own the house. It's incredibly generous and gracious. Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
One of the things that I think the rules center around, and I mean, there are those two rules, and then there are other unspoken rules as well. I mean, another really obvious unspoken rule would be like no firearms or explosives or weapons of any kind.
That explicit.
Oh shoot!
Right?
Communicated or uncommunicated.
That's why we only have butter knives.
But
we actually don't have any steak knives. I'm just
no steak knives. Oh my gosh! But like anything that could cause like really irreparable, quick risk or harm to the relationships of the people that you live with, right? Like this is like in an effort to preserve like the safety and security of your housemates, right? So I think like those two rules and then other rules that are kind of in that same vein, right? No firearms, no explosives,
and
no,
obviously
like,
there are lots of people in the world who would think those rules are stupid and who would disagree. And
absolutely,
they can make up their own rules.
Yeah, for sure. And people might
and
say,
they
well,
can
who says
run
they get to decide?
an
And I think
illegal
that's
casino.
where the homeowner thing comes in handy because it's like it is our house.
Yeah.
And there is a certain environment that we want to craft, and
Like
we're
we
not.
get to play that card right now. We get to play the homeowner card. Right now.
And we're not very
and now we
controlling.
have a kid.
But,
which only elevates the need for clarity around things like that.
Absolutely.
And we didn't have a kid when you guys moved in, which is cool.
Well, it was
actually
great.
set
I
these
remember
up
when
for the
you
kid.
you did though. I
actually
remember
revealed that you were pregnant.
You
like,
invited me.
the
You were
day
like,
that I came
I
in.
remember, I had bed bugs. The person I was subletting from was like, we got to move. And I emailed you and I was like, could you still have that room? And then I remember before I moved any of my stuff over, you came to me and you're like, so don't tell anyone, but like, we're expecting, do you still want to live with us? And so then it was kind of neat because like we had almost a year then of living with you guys, but we were kind of, it was almost like we had this goal of like, okay, like we want to foster like a healthy household for us who are living here, but also like, we're going to have a little person here soon. And so it's kind of, it's for our own well-being, but it's also we're sort of building a dynamic and building a household that's then going to support this new little person who just, needs every safety and comfort.
And what a perfect transition.
Perfect person for next
for the
episode.
Third episode
of the
Unintentional Community podcast.
Yes. We're all grinning.
Oh, because she's
so
the
excited.
best.
I can't
It
wait.
won't just be gushing, but next week we're going to talk about family, chosen family, biological family, community
And
housing, and our little queen, Clementine Louise Makins. So that'll be next week. We'll talk about what it's like to have your own child and have other people living in that home that are participating in her life at a really hands-on level. You all will talk about what it's like to live the life of a parent when you're not. And hopefully we'll uncover a lot of stuff beyond Clementine, even about what it means to live in a family life together here in this kind of unique situation that we've got. So thanks again, everyone, for listening in to Unintentional Community. Again, this is a 5-week podcast series. We might do something beyond that 5 weeks, but we're just coming to 5 weeks for now. That'll be season 1. All right. Thanks, everybody. What did we do last time? It was
Bye.
Bye.
No.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Unintentional Community podcast. We are mixed and recorded in downtown Hamilton at Sheepdog Studios. Special thanks to Gareth Inkster for that very catchy jingle. And you can go get his new album on anywhere that you get your music called Last Year. And don't forget to send your questions in to askahousie@gmail.com. Of course, Housie is spelled Housie. Askahousie@gmail.com, and we'll answer those in our 5th and final episode. Thanks.